All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We have a great panel today. As you can see, we have 5 esteemed colleagues that are all going to talk a lot of good stuff about cybersecurity. So please be thinking about questions because as we get toward the end, we're each going to have a few minutes, a little bit of time for each of them to speak, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. So please be ready with some questions. So I'm armed with some questions in case you guys don't have any, but it'd be great to hear from everyone in the audience. So that being said, let me welcome Jeff. Jeff's going first.
I'm Jeff Wynn, the former owner of New River Computing. Hanson Ball, the other former owner of New River Computing. John's the new one. And we'll pass it around that way. You could say a couple things about yourself. I don't know, what's my job, John? I guess I sit up here and look pretty. That's what I do. And here's this guy, Dave.
Hey, my name is David Raymond. I'm the interim associate vice president for research computing at Virginia Tech. Before that, I was the interim vice president for IT and chief information officer. So I've been in interim roles for about the last year, a little over a year. Initially, I thought that the university was like recognizing my innate leadership abilities, but now I think they just like are afraid to give me a real job and don't know how to get rid of me. So we'll see where I go after this.
Hi, everybody. Ooh, got a bit of an echo there. My name is Suzanne Pierce. I am an attorney with CowanPerry. I focus my practice on corporate law and also intellectual property. So cybersecurity and privacy comes under that. And I focus a lot on that as a token European in our firm, originally from the UK, from Northern Ireland. I'm well pleased to at least try and explain why that crazy GDPR thing happened. I have an insight into the European mind. But yes, excited to be here today and give you hopefully not the boring side of it, which is the legal side, but hopefully some tips to help with compliance going forward.
Thank you. I'm Natalie Suarez. I'm with ConnectWise, and I am a cybersecurity evangelist, because I can say that now for ConnectWise.
I'm Moe McClanahan. I currently work with the National White Collar Crime Center. I'm a high-tech crime specialist where I teach law enforcement around the U.S. how to investigate cyber crimes. I'll tell you a little bit more in depth of my background once we get to my slides.
All right, I guess I should have introduced myself when I had the microphone to begin with. So I'm John McIlwaine. I'm with New River Computing. As Jeff mentioned, Hanson and Jeff sold New River Computing to me, and so I'm looking forward. I've been here about 6-7 weeks in the community, met many faces, met some new faces, saw some new faces today. I'll be moderating, try to keep these folks on task today. I'm told they only have 10 minutes apiece, so we'll give them a couple-minute warning when they're up against the clock, and we'll see how it goes. I think it's going to be a good conversation. So with that being said, Jeff, are you?
I'm going to speak for less than usual and try to run through some things. I think many of you know exactly how I feel about some of these things and are aware of it. Basically, I do believe that cybersecurity is everyone's job, and like not just IT people. And one of the things I strongly believe there's not enough communication amongst stakeholders in cybersecurity. That could be business leaders, it could be academics, law enforcement. Mo's opened my eyes to the fact that how little I know about other domains. And so one of the things I want to do is bring people from economic development, business, academia. Just let's not talk nerds to nerds. I think we can move the needle more by talking amongst ourselves, some of us being nerds. People like us, I guess. And I guess I can move on to the next one if I can figure out how to click the thing. Just a real brief recap of what actually cybersecurity is. Most importantly, confidentiality of the data. Making sure nobody accesses the data that shouldn't be able to see what's there, right? That's, in my mind, most of. After that, is the data... is there data integrity? Is the data being changed in some unknown way by either an adversary or by something messing up or whatnot? Doesn't even need to be a bad actor trying to mess things up. It could be a program that's malfunctioning, writing over data, or everybody's seen that kind of thing happen. And availability. Can the data be accessed by those that are authorized to access it when it's needed. So that, in my mind, is sort of the definition of what cybersecurity actually is. One of the things that, this is sort of a slide from the last time we did this with a brand new edition of the CrowdStrike that happened on July 19th. I don't know if you all remember that. Maybe you see people were flying, Natalie. Yeah. This is one of my big concerns with what was going on. Like, it could be a bad actor, SolarWinds, Kaseya. It could be something just went wrong, like the ConnectWise Screen Connect. That's a remote access stuff. And then finally, you all know about the CrowdStrike, because there's nothing like testing out your new code in production globally, because that works out real good for everyone. I think you all know. But it was quite a day. The whole weekend, it was just paying attention to how the event was unfolding and whatnot. Delta canceled 1,200 flights in order to ground stop. I think American did that too. That's a profound problem, right? So again, cybersecurity isn't always, the bad guys. It's being careful how you do things so you don't cause disruptions in other ways. And the other thing I like to talk about is my Aunt Barbara, the national security threat. She's the most lovely lady, and I just love her to death. But there's a lot of people like Aunt Barbara out there, be it somebody who's 90, 91 now. It could be children. It could be folks with developmental issues. I feel like it's important to reach out to those folks. So what I ask everybody here to do is, if you have an Aunt Barbara or there's a child in your life, I would encourage you to help them understand what they can do to help keep themselves safe. And there's a lot of discussion we can have around that. But I think that's one of the most important things we can do as either IT professionals or people that are IT adjacent, or that just know how to work their way around the computer. Who all knows about the SLAM method for detecting phishing emails? Sender links, attachment, message, it's all got to be there. Is the sender Jeff at newrivercomputing.com, or is it Jeff at newrivercomputing.org? Right? It's got to check out. The links, are they really going to New River Computing or somewhere else? Attachments, does it look right? Does it look weird? Dave sends me a PDF. He never does that. I probably give Dave a call and say, hey, is this your PDF? And yeah, it's okay. Okay, I'll open it up. In the message, does it sound like Jeff? Well, with the advent of AI being able to sound like Jeff, that's becoming more of a tricky area. And there's ways of doing that. It's probably harder to teach Aunt Barbara how to paste a message into a website and see if it's generated by AI. My favorite thing to tell everybody when you're having these conversations with folks that may not be as aware of what's going on online, on their cell phone, even on the phone, is always be skeptical. Right? I'm sure I don't got to tell you folks this stuff, but again, it's the lower information people, the less cyber aware we want to have these conversations, even if I've got to have an uncomfortable conversation with Aunt Barbara. Right? I encourage everybody to get out there and talk to these people and help them be safe online. Use good passwords. I'm still working with a good friend of mine, Alex Farling, and we are going to work on forming a nonprofit probably in January of this year to try to get some industry dollars and try to find a good way of communicating with these people that need more cyber awareness. I'm not clear on how that's going to work out. I'm sure there's professionals out there that can help us reach those folks. And now I guess we're going over to Natalie, because this is your slide.
All right. Are you going to be the clicker? I'll be the clicker. Okay, awesome. All right, so I like to use reputable sources when I'm talking about what's going on in the cyber landscape. Now it's working. It's too late. I'm sitting down. Sure, I'll take the clicker. And so the one thing I want to point out here is notice that most of the attacks happen due to credentials. And I think most of you probably know that these credentials are harvested on the dark web. People tend to use the same credentials for everything versus using a password manager. And even individually, password managers are very affordable, right? The other thing I want you to note is third-party risk. There's been 180% growth in exploit vulnerabilities, errors in code, 0 days, things like that, since 2023. And also that the majority of ransomware attacks actually do target small to mid-sized businesses. And that's from the University of Maryland. And I would say that they're probably a pretty reputable source. The other thing I wanted to bring out is I wanted to talk a little bit more about AI today, because that is really changing the threat landscape. And first of all, I want to say I am an AI glass half full kind of person. I see the enormous potential for good that can be done for your business in all kinds of ways, right? But unfortunately for us, every time we get some new cool technology, there are bad guys out there looking for ways to exploit it. And I want you to notice this exponential jump from the beginning of 2023 to the beginning of 2024 for the mentions of generative AI in criminal forums. So they are paying attention. So that's going to get me to all these great stories I have right here. Does anyone remember Napster and how Napster changed music and the digital rights management? I think the same thing is going to happen with AI and publishing, because the New York Times is suing OpenAI and Microsoft, and there are others as well, because in the New York Times case, what's happening is these AIs are spitting out their articles verbatim, right? What does that mean to you as a business owner? Do you have people in your company using AI? Are they accidentally going to spit out something for your company and publish it that really belongs to somebody else? Are you opening yourself up to one of these lawsuits? So be aware of that. Deep fakes rank as the second most common cybersecurity incident for U.S. businesses. We're there. There are deep fakes of many actors. There's deep fakes. I think I had the story about Hong Kong. Yeah, 25 million paid out, in the equivalent of 25 million US dollars, because he had a meeting, a Zoom meeting, Teams meeting, whatever, with who he thought was his CFO and his colleagues, and they were not, right? Because it was a deep fake. Some of these are indistinguishable from real people. So we're going to have to find other methods, like maybe we do have the meeting, and then afterwards we call someone at a number we know and say, hey, was that really you? I think when your spidey sense is tingling, you should listen to it. New attack we're going to see eventually as processing power becomes faster and faster, something called audio jacking. So I reach out to Jeff via phone, and I call him, and there's an adversary in the middle between us, and I talk. He takes my voice and changes it to whatever he wants Jeff to hear. Jeff speaks, the bad guy changes it to whatever he wants me to hear. It only takes a 3-second sample of your voice to create a deep fake audio. The only reason this is only a proof of concept, I can guarantee you, is because we don't have the processing power to do it fast enough yet in real time. But we'll get there soon. What else? There's warnings from the FBI. Officials from the Treasury, State, and FBI are talking about how it's augmenting and allowing unsophisticated threat actors to do very sophisticated things. And one thing I want to caution you on is I would not out and out ban the use of AI in your organization. Someone tells me I can't do something, especially something like that, I'm going to do it. And I think most people would. And unless you're going to take away their cell phone, permanently, they can't even use it at home, you're not going to be able to stop them. You're better off educating them on the correct way to use it and having an AI use policy. So with that, I want to talk about this. This is a technical resource. However, OWASP has published a list of the top 10 for large language models. Those are those GPTs like ChatGPT, Copilot, right? Every one of these 10 applies to small to mid-sized businesses. I just want to talk about a couple real quick. One of them is supply chain. Third-party risks, huge. CrowdStrike wasn't a cyber attack, but it sure as heck was a third-party risk to Delta. I'm not bitter at all anymore about being stuck in Arkansas for 2 days. Maybe I am. Oh, you know what? I didn't circle the other one. Training data poisoning. So AI can be poisoned. It can have people put in malicious input. Like, for instance, think you've hired a junior programmer, right? Software developer. And in my day, we used Stack Overflow, and we still had to worry about that. But they, ask how to do something in an AI, and then they take it as fact, and now they've just deployed malicious code to your infrastructure, right? So that is very possible. And you can even do data poisoning through prompts it's whatever you get back from the AI is all about the prompt you put into it. What else should you be really worried about? Data leakage. I think I may have had on the other slide the story about Samsung. Their engineers used ChatGPT, and they leaked intellectual property. I'm sure that has caused more damage than they can even calculate, because the race between LG, Samsung, Sony, you really don't see that much of a market difference between their electronics and TVs, do you? No, so that was probably huge for them. And then over-reliance. Remember I told you your results may not be correct? On top of that, AI can just out and out hallucinate. We call it a data hallucination, and it's because it's a predictive engine. If it doesn't know the answer, it is going to give you some answer, and it may not be correct. And I think that's it. Oh, I forgot about this one. This one, I was doing some research on litigation in regard to AI, like I just mentioned. This is a really good article. Really good. I would encourage you all to take a moment and read this article, and either someone at New River Computing or I can share the slide deck with you. And my two that I added was educate, 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 and train, train, train. Security awareness training is a great tool, and it is a very cost-effective tool. And I'm talking beyond phishing testing. How should we use a GPT? Is it appropriate to put PHI or personally identifiable information or corporate secrets in a public GPT? The answer is no, but everyone may not know that unless you share it with them. And that's it for me. I'm not sure who's... Oh, that's you. That's Moe.
I'm next.
Oh,
Yep. Okay, so as I had mentioned, I currently work for the NW3C. I better start my timer. And those are some of the classes that I teach to law enforcement. So I teach on digital footprints, seizure of electronics, because we know nowadays most crimes will have some form of electronic evidence, and that is my expertise. Dark web and open source intelligence, and also automated forensic tools. So in my background, I retired from the Christiansburg Police Department, where the last 8.5 years I worked internet crimes against children. And initially, when Jeff had asked me to be a part of cybersecurity talks, I was like, I don't think I really have any kind of background in cybersecurity necessarily, but more in just cyber crimes. So my position, I work both proactive and reactive cases, such as undercover chat investigations. So, to catch a predator, because I look 13, right? And then some of the other proactive, the peer-to-peer file sharing. We talked about Napster. That's how, using programs like Napster that are peer-to-peer, that's how child predators exchange images of child sexual abuse material. We have law enforcement computers that are undercover that can monitor IP addresses that have this type of material in their homes or on their computers. I also worked cases that came from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, any kind of cyber tips, any kind of sexting cases with our children, cyberbullying, online solicitation, and then I also had certifications in digital forensics. And then on top of all of that, I did outreach. So I continue to still do outreach, which Jeff and I have talked about that. I have presented since 2006 to students and adults on internet safety and the changing of technology and how to make better choices online to keep our kids safe, and what parents can look for. And so when we talked about cybersecurity, I was like, I don't think I really have anything to relate to that. I don't even know if I know what the word means, because it seems like a hot topic and people kind of use it. I don't think they really know what it means. You keep saying that word. Anybody? Thank you, Princess Bride. Thank you. And so I did some research and I Googled what cybersecurity was, and we know that now when you Google, you can find all sorts of different types of definitions. And so I kind of had to put it all together on the main topics that it was hitting on through the different results. And what I came up with was the collective methods to help protect the integrity, which Jeff talked about, of computer systems, networks, data, and programs from digital attacks. And I've said, okay, well, I can see where I can relate to this in the sense that I work on computers, I work computer crimes, and I understand the whole protection as a police officer. And I said, but I feel like there's something missing in all of this. And that is what I can offer is the protection of people, the victims behind these attacks. So I like to kind of give a different view on when we think of cybersecurity is to think about the data of the people, like your clients, your data, your family's data, and especially what information is being put out there, how it's being put out there, how your children are sharing it, and think of it as a whole. And moving on to that, when it came to the scope of cyber crime categories, and this is outdated, it is from 2021, but I love that I have graphics that goes along with this. And working child exploitation cases, I already knew what numbers looked like when it came to those types of reports. But I was curious, does the whole world see cybercrime the same way I do? And so when I Googled what's the top cybercrime in the US, and it was reported as phishing scams. And that there was a reported of 323,000 victims. The number of financial loss was about $6 million back in 2021. So think of that number, 325,000. Then, because I know the numbers when it comes from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and cyber tips on child exploitation, that comes in to 29 million reports. So kind of a bit of a disconnect where Google or the world sees cybercrime as phishing or monetary type of loss. And those are crimes or victims that are adults, that are clicking on links, that are making adult decisions to transfer money to the wrong account, and so compared to 29 million children, or at least reports against children, that is, to me, where the disconnect is. So when we talk about cybersecurity and a disconnect with criminal justice, I looked back in some of the training, like in colleges or any kind of workplace relations of what's being trained. And in cybersecurity, you are learning about networks, programs, data, protecting all of those systems, even the legal side of things with cybersecurity. And then in criminal justice, we study people. We study sociology, the behavior of people in crime. We talk about the legal system and how everything ties in. And we don't talk about computers in criminal justice, and we don't talk about people in cybersecurity. And so I've always been very lucky that Jeff and I met and that we're able to bring this connection together, partnering where we're educating communities and we're starting with small businesses here in the community. And just like Jeff said, I like to tell people, whoever comes to a presentation that I put on, that you become my ambassador, and that we start really talking and becoming a village when it comes to protecting our data, our family's data, and especially our children.
Let's go a little more slides on the page.
Awesome. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Jeff, for setting this up one more time, and I appreciate the group of panelists. I've been doing cybersecurity work for a while, and we've done a handful of these events, and every time we do one, I learn something new from this group. So this is wonderful, and I appreciate this group being here, and thanks to you all for coming. As I mentioned, I'm the interim Associate Vice President for Research Computing. Really, I'm an IT security person. I'm not a research computing person, but there was a hole that needed to be filled, and so I'm helping out with that for a few months. I wanted to talk just for a few minutes about how we think about cybersecurity at Virginia Tech, and so I'm really going to be talking about sort of frameworks and strategies for approaching cybersecurity for an organization. This can be a large organization or a small organization, right? So this is the challenge that we face. Some of you may have seen this slide before. This is the challenge that we face at Virginia Tech. We really have three populations in a general sense that we're trying to protect, right? So we have the administrative enterprise, that is finance and human resources and IT and all those sort of business processes that we have to secure and manage. Right? Then we have the academic and instructional component. So we have students who bring their devices to our network and connect them. And so for that group, we really operate as an ISP within the Division of IT, right? We're providing internet service to people who come to campus. Those are students, staff, and faculty. Those are also visitors, right? So any visitor, you all can come to campus. You can come here to the football stadium. You can connect to the Virginia Tech network, and now you're on my network. And we have to think about how to secure the network from people who can just walk in and connect their device, right? And then we have the research arm. So I'm very focused these days on securing research for obvious reasons, and that brings up a whole host of new challenges because almost all of the funded research that we do at Virginia Tech, which is between $500 million and $600 million a year, is funded by the federal government, right? These are federal grants for us to do research for the Department of Defense, for the Department of Energy, for the National Science Foundation, for National Institutes of Health, federal agencies who have very specific security requirements for the data that we're processing on their behalf, right? So when you think of the research component, it's not just one standard that we're trying to meet. It's a standard that's very much based on the specific funding agency. So some unique challenges in this space, and this is a thing that is becoming increasingly important at the federal government level, right? They're starting to think more about how we're securing their data, and this is a problem that we're working hard on right now at Virginia Tech. So these are the three populations, and we have to provide a network security framework that meets all these, right? And here's how we think about it at the university within the IT security office, and I'm borrowing this analogy from Randy Marchani, who's Virginia Tech's IT security officer. He says Virginia Tech is like a museum, right? Anybody can come into the museum and look around. You come in the entry point, you walk around, you leave. We have to think about the specific things in the museum that we want to secure, and we have to do that based on the level of risk. So this picture is does anybody know what this picture is of? Can you see what that is? It's the Mona Lisa. Yeah, who's been to see the Mona Lisa in person? Yeah, it's pretty underwhelming. You go in and it's this little thing. Does this have a pointer on it? This is the Mona Lisa. So it's not very big. It's covered by glass, and you can never get any closer to it than this because there's always a crowd of people in there. Anyway, so the Mona Lisa is secured in a very specific way, right? This thing is got guards all around it. It's secured in this glass case. It's in a part of the museum that's very well secured. But if you go to other part of the Louvre in Paris, the security is completely different. Sometimes you look around, there's no security guards. You can imagine sort of pulling a painting off the wall and walking out the door, and people sometimes do that, right? So we think of security based on risk, right? So bullets on the right side here. So we control access. We use modern identity and access management to very specifically control who can get access to what components of our network, and that's based on role, right? We use a thing called ABAC, attribute-based authorization, and so with that we can say, You're a student, you get access to these things. You're an employee, you get access to these things. You're an alumni, you can get access to these things. And it's very specific, right? Not only am I an employee, I'm an employee in the division of IT. I'm a director of the Advanced Research Computing Unit. And all those different attributes that are applied to my account give me very specific access to very specific things. So we use that as sort of overlaying this approach to giving access to very specific things based on attributes associated with your persona. We do this risk-based device categorization, right? So we identify all of the electronic systems on campus, and then we assign a risk score to each one of those devices. And that's based on two things. It's based on, first, the criticality to university operations, right? So think of email. Email is critical to university operations. That's a high priority item. Okay, so there's the criticality to university operations. And then the second thing is the kind of data that those systems manage, right? So most systems manage low risk data. It's people doing email, people using the web, people just sort of doing administrative jobs. Students doing their homework, students accessing Canvas, that's all low-risk data, right? But if you think of like the PII that's managed by the HR department, if you think of the financial data that's managed by the finance department and the bursar, if you think of the IT data that we manage in the division of IT, now you have people who are managing very high-risk data, and so the systems that manage high-risk data, we want to treat those differently, and that's what we do. So we catalog all the systems, and then we identify the risk score for each one, and then we have specific security controls that we apply, whether they're high, moderate, or low risk. So that's the third bullet, right? Apply security controls based on risk. The fourth bullet, pervasive outbound monitoring, right? Randy Marchani, our IT security officer, says there's not a breach unless data leaves our network, right? So if somebody comes on our network and mucks around in it and then leaves and they don't take any sensitive university data, that's not a breach. So we are very careful about outbound monitoring and looking for university data leaving our network, and that's when we alert and start our incident response process. And then that's the last bullet, right? Active response. We respond. We have a 24/7 security operations center, and we respond to bad events as they happen. If you're thinking of a way to sort of compartmentalize all these different activities that we've been talking about this afternoon, here's a good approach: the NIST cybersecurity framework. This framework is available for free. It's created by a federal agency, NIST, National Institute for Standards and Technology. They define cybersecurity standards for federal agencies using documents like 800-53. A lot of you have probably heard of that before. 800-171 is another document that is for controlled unclassified data. The NIST cybersecurity framework is exactly what it sounds like, right? It provides a framework for thinking about how to secure your network. And I'm not going to talk about the individual components here, but it's the, identify the systems on your network, think about how you protect them, think about how you detect malicious behavior, think about how you respond to that, and then at the end, think about how you recover from those adverse events. So this is a great framework. There's lots of resources on the NIST website associated with this, and I encourage you to take a look at this if you're thinking about how to manage security for an organization. And then finally, we know that it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, right? October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Within Cybersecurity Awareness Month is Cybersecurity Career Week. This is a federal government effort to help people think about cybersecurity careers. I provide a link here. It's on the NIST website. They have a bunch of resources and activities during the week of October 14th to 19th around cybersecurity careers. One of the things I do is I run an organization called the Virginia Cyber Range. We host an event during Cybersecurity Career Week. It's a Capture the Flag workshop and a CTF competition. If anybody's interested in CTFs, this is a great way to get started. It takes a sort of a traditional Capture the Flag, Jeopardy-style Capture the Flag competition, and it divides the categories amongst the work roles that are defined by the NIST Cybersecurity Workforce Framework. So it's a good way to become familiar with cybersecurity jobs. If you have students or young people in your life that you want to educate on this kind of thing, this is a kind of a fun way to get them started. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic to Suzanne.
Last but not least, I do not need that because I do not have slides. Who wants to see slides with law stuff on it? Come on. Boring. Hopefully the accent's going to make it more entertaining. I'm going to go real Belfast on you soon. Good afternoon. It is great to be here. I am going to talk about, we've obviously heard a lot on the technology side of cybersecurity. I'm going to go to the social side of it with the law, cyber law. Moe has already touched a little bit on the criminal side of things. I'm not going to go into that too much because obviously at the federal level, there's a number of laws where hackers can be prosecuted, any sort of access, unauthorized access, things like that. But we all know by looking at the news that hackers are prosecuted maybe less than 5% of the time, not located. Trying to enforce that is extremely difficult. So what we see mostly in the news is the impact that it has on companies and their operations and their customers, right? Because it's always the customers that end up bearing the brunt of it. So as a corporate attorney, my focus is on my clients, who are always businesses in Southwest Virginia, who are trying to take care of their customers' data. And so my focus is on what companies can do on a day-to-day basis to protect themselves and to make sure that they are compliant with cyber law that applies to them. And so my focus is really going in with a client, and I will help with really that initial data assessment where we're seeing, and it kind of touches a bit on what David was talking about, what they do at Virginia Tech. You know, there's that sort of analysis, right? You go in and you see what sort of data we are actually collecting, and you would be surprised how often businesses really don't understand maybe the breadth of the information that they're collecting and the sensitivity of that information. They don't always know maybe what cookies are actually operating on their website. You know, someone maybe knows on the team, but it's the guy who's actually pretty quiet in the meetings. So he knows exactly what, you know, they're collecting from their website, but maybe the powers that be who are talking to the attorney don't know. So my job is really with my clients is to come in, see what data you actually have, see what data you're hosting, that you're processing as part of your business and the service that it's providing or the product that it's providing. And then from there, seeing what law actually applies. So we obviously have the criminal side of things, but we also have the civil side. And as the most popular one, obviously, from the last number of years, 2018, was the GDPR, the EU law that was so far-reaching, because if you're in any way targeting a European customer, even though you're based in the US, you're going to have to be compliant with that law. And the consequences of you violating that law is up to 4% of gross revenues and up to multi-million in euros. And they are not shy at fining companies. So that was a big one. But even if you think about it more recently, 2023, we've got the Virginia Consumer Data Protection Act. We also have a very strong California Data Protection Act, which is very far-reaching as well. So for clients, we're going in and we're saying, okay, well, where are your customers located? You know, what sort of information are you getting from your customers? Because you can have a product where you have a number of contracts, and it turns out 50,000 people in California are actually accessing that product, and you are scraping information from them. You're getting information from them. They're signing up for your service. And so all of a sudden, you know, you have to be compliant with that California law. So you have to be aware of things like that. There's obviously different thresholds for different laws. I can talk you through just the Virginia one, which requires that if you control or process personal data of at least 100,000 Virginia residents, or you control or process personal data of at least 25,000 residents, and you derive more than 50% of your income from the sale of personal data in Virginia, you have to be compliant. And there's similar thresholds for California. So we're thinking, okay, are you doing this? Do you get this amount of data? Are you, dealing with this amount of customers in Virginia? And then from there, we have to think about compliance. And these laws set out very clearly what you have to do. The big one is to make sure that the consumers that you're dealing with, customers that you're dealing with, they know what their rights are under this legislation. So we're talking privacy policies, we're talking statements on your website to let your customers know, hey, you have a right to know what information I'm pulling about you. You have a right to access that information. You have a right to correct that information. And you have a right to ask me to delete that information. Also, I'm only allowed to hold that information for a reasonable amount of time that is reasonable when you think about the service. So if I'm providing you a service for 1 year, I should only really hold your information for that 1 year. And after that, I should have policies in place for deleting that information. So we're thinking about that outward communication with customers of our businesses. And then on the other side, which Natalie touched on, you want to educate within your company. So we want to have policies in place. And we know every business loves to have policies, but who actually reads them? But we're talking about really educating your staff. Hey, this data that we are taking from our customers is super important. We have to make sure we're compliant with these laws because there's consequences. It's the Attorney General in Virginia who's going to enforce that law. It's $7,500 for each violation that's found. You know, this can add up. So you want to make sure that there are very clear procedures in place for how you are processing and storing, deleting data, how that just each staff member knows exactly. It's no longer that one person on your team who knows exactly what you have and what you're doing with it, but that everybody is aware. Everybody's responsible. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm helping to draft these documents with clients. I'm helping to educate their staff members. And it's really about identifying what data you have and then making sure that you have all the procedures in place and all those protections and safeguards in place. Also, one part of it too is just making sure that our clients are thinking about the insurance side of it as well. We're talking about cybersecurity insurance and making sure there's adequate coverage there as well. Just to touch for a minute on AI. As an attorney, I'm not a fan. My husband is a programmer. He's a web developer, and he loves it. He's just like, oh, did you see what you do this? Oh, Suzanne, you should do this. And I'm like, I'm not touching it. It's not having my data. As an attorney, I'm like, oh, it's terrifying. And as an IP attorney, you know, I'm thinking about copyright issues. There are endless infringement cases right now in the courts over AI because you're putting in information. Who does that information belong to? There's actually a case that's going to the Supreme Court where someone who generated an image with an AI tool is trying to copyright that image. And the Copyright Office are trying to refuse that and not allow them to record it and to protect it because it was generated with AI. So it's a really hot topic. My fear is, especially with businesses, you know, we're in the New River Valley. We have amazing technology businesses coming out of Virginia Tech especially, right? They're coming up with such future forward, just fantastic technology. The potential for compromising that and the IP, the property, the worth, the value of that technology by using AI is what terrifies me. And so that's the one thing that I try and speak to clients about. You just need to be super careful. As attorneys, we have to be very careful. Everybody's heard the cases about, you know, attorneys getting ChatGPT to draft their briefs and there's fake cases in it, right? Everybody's heard about those cases. And they get sanctioned by the court, as they should. Read your brief. But for us as attorneys, there's a massive issue with client-attorney confidentiality, because if we try and write something and I'm putting potentially client information into one of these AI tools, is that not a breach of client-attorney confidentiality? So things just to keep in mind, you know, with your business is really, am I compromising our value here? Because if you're a technology company, your value is in your technology. It's in your know-how. It's in your trade secrets, what you've come up with. And you have to be so careful that everyone on the team knows what they can and can't do when it comes to AI. So from a legal standpoint, that's my fear for sure. But yeah, from the cybersecurity side, it's really know what you're collecting and make sure you have those safeguards in place for sure. That's all I got.
Now is when it goes off the rails, John, just so you know. I'm going to back up for a few slides. I realized I've made a mistake in one of mine, and I just realized it when we were sitting here talking about what is cybersecurity. And Mo made that connection of people. That's missing from here, isn't it? And that really should be part of it. Because really, ultimately, when we're doing all these things, what are we trying to protect? People, our government, privacy. So I'm going to fix this next time we go around there. So I guess we're going to do Q&A now, John.
All right, so pretty interesting stuff, right? So as I sat here and I'm listening to all of them speak, we could have given each of them the full hour, right, or 40 minutes, whatever we spent. But if you think about Dave's challenges, what are there, 30, 35,000 students here? Probably 7,500, 10,000 turnover every year, 15, 20,000 employees. Some of those turnover every year or every semester and so forth. So that's 40, 50,000 people with an evolving role of people, all the physical buildings, all of the sensitive data. We have a client who is doing stuff for DOE, DOD. The amount of work we help them do on the cyber front and the organizational front to meet those standards is immensely complex. So I understand. I can't fathom how you and your team and others are doing that for this size environment. Fortunately, most of us, our environments are a little bit smaller, right? So that's helpful. But you think about like the legal side. You know, years ago, I had a client. We were serving somebody who was a fast food restaurant, 300 locations, and they did not want to take we were MSP business at the time. Did not want to take our recommendations. Did not want to take our recommendations for some cyber stuff. The IT person got hacked with a phishing scam. The end result was millions of dollars spent on remediation that led to a bankruptcy of the business. Lawsuits, everything else. It just was a total wreck. Credit card numbers, everything is a total disaster. That could have been prevented with probably not that much attention and not that many dollars in the scheme of things, right? And then you think about 29 million. Like that number is going to just keep that. I'm not going to get that out of 42. Well, now I am going to get 29 million out of my head because now it's 42 million, right? And so then you look at Natalie. ConnectWise, for those of you who don't know, is a platform that MSPs use to manage all of the clients, all of the client information, all of everything we do. It kind of runs on a platform like ConnectWise. So you think about hundreds of thousands of businesses through her, tens of thousands of customers like New River are being managed on her platform. So they have this exposure to all of these different companies of different sizes and all of the challenges they have, which is probably what helps inform some of your advocacy, right? So, and then of course, Aunt Barbara. I think about Aunt Barbara, but you know, I bring it home because I think about my parents. My mom thinks that when she changes her password from Scotch, the name of 3 cats ago, Scotch 45, her birth year, to, you know, Scotch 40, my stepdad's birth year, that's now a more secure password. And it's 8 characters. And I've tried, how many times have you guys talked to your parents about, let's make it 12, let's make it 16, let's make it longer, let alone get into password manager? That's not going to happen. So I have Aunt Barbara, but it's my parents because I'm their IT guy. So anyway, fascinating discussion. Hopefully this leads some of you to have a bunch of questions because these folks would love to answer some questions and go into any one of these topics or some other topic more deeply. And if we need to take something offline and cover it in even more depth afterwards, everyone here, I'm sure, would be happy to do so. So with that being said, I'd like to open it up for questions. Who's first? Somebody's got to go first. This is where I have to just call on somebody, isn't it? Yeah. Anyone?
I don't know, I guess you just mentioned passwords. I don't have... talking about passwords, is a password manager, you think, the best way to go about it? Because I know like LastPass has had some breaches, and I feel like I'm less likely to be targeted.
I do feel that a password manager is your best defense. Not only can you store your passwords in there, you know, those secret questions that banks and cell phone companies have you answer. You want to lie on those, and you want to save that in your password manager because they could also be social engineered to, SIM swap your phone so that a bad guy is getting your MFA codes instead of you. I personally use one password. And it really makes it easier to manage unique passwords. And actually, NIST just released new guidance on passwords, saying things like it's more important to have a longer password with ASCII characters rather than changing passwords. Changing passwords every 60 to 90 days is old school. That is how you get people changing it from Scotch 40 to Scotch 45 or back and forth. And it's really the only way to make sure you have unique, secure passwords. There's all kinds of resources online about how quickly a password can be decrypted. And I think it's like seconds or milliseconds for an 8-character password, right? My passwords are all at least 20 characters long, unless whatever I'm using, because sometimes I still run into things I'm using that don't allow it to be that long or don't allow it to have an ampersand or an asterisk or whatever. So.
And I'll just add to that. So with the password managers, the nice thing about it is we don't have the bandwidth to, one, remember our passwords, and two, be creative to create a new one. So you can go in there and you just generate one. You tell it how many characters you want it to be, what type of characters, and then you can just refresh it. And so when it's time to, because some companies make you change it every so often, and you just go in there and say regenerate. It's already saved, and you can access it from either cloud, depending on what product you use, or from a hardware. And I personally use Proton Mail, so they have the email, VPN, and you get passwords in there.
So password manager, yes, obviously, and they all operate a little differently. LastPass had a problem. Many of them have been hacked before. Nothing's completely safe, right? So you can't put all your confidence in your password manager. But what you need to do is password manager plus multi-factor authentication on all, not everything, but on your what you consider to be your critical accounts. And those are what are the important accounts that you want to use 2FA on? What are the important ones? Financial and email. Yeah, why email? Well, yeah, goes without saying, password manager. Yeah, financial accounts for obvious reasons. Email, because that's how you change all your other passwords, right? And then, obviously, you got to do it on your password manager to protect that thing as well as you can.
There's also different kinds of multi-factor authentication. The most secure is actually a hardware device. The least secure is having text messages sent to you for a multitude of reasons. And there are attacks that can defeat multi-factor authentication when you're using something like your SMS texting, and not when you're using like something like a YubiKey. Just one more thing.
The nice thing about password managers, they can also tell you and complain when you're reusing passwords. And I don't know about all of you out there. I had to spend about 3 or 4 solid days going through all of my passwords and making them long, strong, and unique. And that's no fun at all. But it's done.
So I bet you didn't think you were going to get that much answers, right? But listen, that just scratched the surface. There's so much more to know about passwords and password managers and how useful they can be and other ways to secure things. So, at New River, we have everything locked down, multi-factor, different sorts of character generators, all sorts of things. So it's really it's interesting to see how far you can take it. Now, ultimately, someone should ask this question. We could have 100% security, but there would be 0% productivity, right? And that ultimately goes back to what Dave was saying about risk-based assessment, understand how much of this is worth doing. Everything they just described is worth doing. That's not a hassle at all in the scheme of things, everything they just described. So, that answer your question? Great. You have a question?
You basically just touched on it a little bit, and I wrote it down, so I'm not piggybacking off of you. So, can we get too strict on security of networks that can give our customers the of accepting lesser or not being as strict? Because we're too strict on our security, people want to get away from that and they cheat. Can we be too strict on what we do for security?
A lot of that's driven by people not experiencing what happens when they take it easy and get breached. But I'm going to let these guys answer.
I think the answer to that is yes. And I'd like Dave to comment on that some too. So we are very strict, and there's a number of our clients that are very unhappy with how locked down their systems are. However, penalty for failure is great. And so if you talk to Tommy back there, if you want to know about cyber liability insurance, 2 events last summer that I talked about, probably the last 2 times we did this, they had cyber liability insurance in place. They were able to hire the incident response people. They were able to hire the lawyers. They were able to communicate with the people who were affected, and their cyber liability insurance covered this. If it weren't for that cyber liability insurance, it very well may have been a bankrupting event. And that's how important it is to have cyber liability insurance in place. You want to comment on the...
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's about managing risk, right? So you need to think about what the threat is for the specific thing that you're trying to secure, and then apply appropriate protections based on the threat. And so we tell people at the IT security office, we hand out for people who don't want to use a password manager, we hand out a booklet that you can write down your passwords in. And people say, why would I can't write down my password. That violates every cybersecurity policy I've ever heard, right? Well, of course you can write down your password. I mean, you're never going to remember all your passwords if you don't write them down. And the threat model is not somebody picking your pocket and finding your password book. The threat model is somebody in China or Russia or Iran or some other Eastern European country hacking into your bank and taking your money. And they're not going to go to your office and steal your password booklet, right? So it's about considering considering the threat and taking appropriate actions. You want the right thing to do to be the easy thing to do, and that takes some creativity on behalf of the IT security team. But obviously, if you make it too difficult, people are going to find workarounds, and then you just defeat the purpose of the whole program.
I will say from a legal standpoint as well that the law doesn't set unreasonable or just like expectations that companies are never going to be able to hit because it's going to cost too much money to actually put all these safeguards in place. The law is very much, and I'm sure you hear this word batted around, but it's what's reasonable in the circumstances. It cannot be something that's overly burdensome for a company so that it can't actually run the business and it makes it go broke because they've spent so much money on security measures. That's one thing to keep in mind too. I don't say that I hope that doesn't disincentivize people for actually putting security measures in place and doing all of these things that we've talked about. But it is that idea that there's not this perfect bar, right? And it's only the big companies that can hit it because they've got the resources. It's very much specific to your situation. And was it reasonable for you to put those measures in place? And if it was and you didn't, heck yes, you're going to be responsible and the court is going to find you so. But if it wasn't and that would have been overly burdensome and you couldn't have operated, the court's going to recognize that.
I was going to say, this is the reason why you should do a risk assessment and cover people, process, and tech. Because if you do that risk assessment, part of that is going to include what are your gaps in people and process and technology? And then from there, you can prioritize and say, what are the risks to my environment? Then what is the likelihood of these happening? And what is the impact if they do happen? And that's how you make decisions, because they're business decisions, not technical decisions on what you should do.
Okay, you got nothing.
And what's interesting too is you think about the cyber insurance piece. It used to be that cyber insurance really controlled what big companies did because that's who was getting hacked. Now it's small companies that are getting hacked, and now small companies are going to have to get cyber insurance. Unlike health insurance, where the health insurance companies all say, we hope you'll exercise, we hope you'll eat right, we have some things to teach you about that stuff. Cyber insurance has gotten smart because there's so much risk. So one of the things they're starting to do with companies is they're coming in requiring actions, like some of the things we've talked about today, where your businesses will have to implement things or else you won't be insured for cyber. And so it's a little bit different than other types of insurance. As auto insurance, you just get it. Cyber insurance is you're going to go through, they're going to come through and they're going to do an analysis of your technology, your process, your safety measures, and other things. And there are a lot of tools out there that exist through companies like New River that you can get on your own, or through, Dave has a whole IT group here, but that really help address all of those underlying conditions. So if a computer gets hacked, that computer, the tools can isolate that from the network automatically so it doesn't permeate everything. Those are the types of tools that you're going to start seeing cyber insurance companies require that everyone have. Who's next?
So our company is going to look at deploying AI in some fashion in the next 2 years to help streamline documentation. And that's been like a hot topic on the radar for us. How do we prepare that technology, knowing that while it's going to have advantages, there's also going to open up risk to our organization? How do we prepare that from like a procedure standpoint, from a process standpoint, and a technology security standpoint?
And their business has HIPAA issues to think about as that layers in.
Yeah, I'll be brief, and I'm going to hand the mic to Natalie. But so we're doing this at Virginia Tech right now, right? I'm the co-chair of a university working group on artificial intelligence. We're thinking about responsible use, and my primary concern is security requirements. Honestly, for about 90% of our use of AI, our existing policies and procedures cover the use, right? We already have IT security policies that say where I can put university data, and those apply to AI tools as well. And as Natalie pointed out, if I start putting my client's data in some AI tool, then I'm violating my contract with my client. So so existing policies and procedures are going to cover you most of the time. We're in the middle of a policy review to identify those specific policies that we may need to amend, and I would encourage you to do that. Look at your existing policies and standards and identify which that you need to amend. The bigger piece of it is an education piece. People need to understand how existing policies apply to the AI space, and with that, you may need some help from outside, somebody who can help you think about that a little more deeply, because it's, there's lots of nuances, and there are some smart people out there who can help you.
I would highly encourage you to work with a trusted advisor like New River, because you have the options. If you're a Microsoft 365 shop, are you? You can deploy Copilot, and Copilot has many of those protections in place, but you're going to have to educate your employees, because it's very easy in Copilot to swish between the private instance and the public instance. So the reason we recommend that you have a separate AI use policy, and there's nothing that doesn't say that your use policy can still refer to other policies, right? I would have especially in a small business, I would have a separate AI use policy, because you want it to be digestible. If you make your policies too long, nobody's going to read them, okay? And do you realize AI is the biggest disruptor since the internet in the 90s? The biggest tech disruptor. So I think it deserves its own policy, which can refer to others, right? But the biggest is to understand and train your employees the difference between using your protected internal and the public. And Copilot, for my liking, I don't like how easy it is to switch between the two. Like we have at my work at ConnectWise, we have Copilot. We also have our own internal instance of ChatGPT. And it's interesting, the ChatGPT instance, it's not easy to switch. I cannot switch between public and private. I have to open a totally different app to use the public ChatGPT. So there's no chance of me being in a rush and making an error. Yeah.
Is that any follow-up on that?
Can you guys talk about different models of 2FA? Multi-factor authentication.
You mean like different types? You mean like, so you can get a text message? Bad. It is not good. And not only could you have the danger of being SIM swapped, the technology for text messaging is also easily defeatable. I forget what the technical, I can't remember right now, sorry. Yeah, it could be spoofed. The most secure, like I said, is a hardware key. And in between, you have like password apps like Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator. Unfortunately, for my Google stuff, they want you to use Google. For my Microsoft, it wants you to use Microsoft. And then I prefer Authy. And I wear a tinfoil hat because 1Password can also do multi-factor authentication, but I don't want to have all my eggs in one basket. So what they do is they auto-generate a code. So I'll log into, say I log into my bank account, right? And then I'll go to, I wish my bank was this advanced, but they're not. And then I go to my app and I'll have a 6-digit code and it'll say, hey, put in this 6-digit code, right? Now, right, you have like 30 seconds or 15 seconds or whatever, and the code rotates. Now that still can be intercepted by some of the adversary in the middle MFA attacks. So really, the best one, the one that has the least chance of being defeated is a hardware key or using a pass key. Yeah, I have. Yeah, mine's in my bag somewhere. It's a little tiny key about this big. It's not very expensive, and it works by I can hold it. I have, what is it, NFC? Is that the thing on your phone? And NFC, yeah, so you don't have to connect it. It's just, it reads it. You can put it against your phone, or you can put it, you can plug the little USB-C thing into your computer, and then you touch it, and it'll release the key. Now, if I lost that, it wouldn't detect the fingerprint. So it's even, okay against loss. Now, passkeys, you may have noticed sometimes when you go to certain websites, even like your Gmail, it'll ask you to generate a passkey. That's something you can like save in your phone, or you can save in a password manager. And those are phishing resistant. So that adversary in the middle, that's even more phishing resistant because it's something you have plus something you are, like your biometric. Like I have to use my biometric or my password for 1Password or my phone in order to unlock and use that passkey. I'm trying to think, what other types of, now, yeah, having an email code, that's also easily defeatable. Yeah, phone call, that is also, I forget what the technology, but that is also easily defeatable, and even worse now with the deep fake. Yeah, so that's really going to be, yeah. I have a really good website that like lists them all out and says what that technology that's like on the tip of my tongue right now that's easily defeatable. Yeah, I'll send that to you and you can send it out, and it has like a whole table. But really the best thing is either a passkey or like a YubiKey. Right. The app, the only problem with the app is you can have what we call MFA fatigue. So one of the Uber breaches was due to MFA fatigue because they kept saying, hey, is this you logging in? And finally they were just like, yes, it's me. Yeah. So be careful about that. Microsoft Authenticator has actually changed the way it works because of MFA fatigue. You actually have to put in the number generated. It's no longer like, yes, is it you? It'll say, what number do you see on your screen now? So that makes it a little better than a little harder to do MFA fatigue. I guess you could still have that come up a million times, but you'd have to go look and you wouldn't be able to see the number. So, yeah.
Okay, so we just noticed that we're about 1:30, and just wanted to say we're mindful of your time. If anyone needs to roll, please feel free. We'll take a minute or two so we aren't disruptive, but please, we know some of you have other things to get to, and then we can continue the Q&A for those who have some time or would like to continue asking other questions. So why don't we take a minute or two to just see how that goes.
Thanks, Mickey. We'll see you later on. I want to say it was Duo that had those pushes going on, yes or no, and then one day they switched them so that the yes and no were in different locations, and that led to some problems. But even that pull push notion is kind of sketch, because in the middle of the night you're getting pushes and you think you're going to hit the no, and you hit the yes. So that's one of the reasons that's a little bit not quite as good in my mind. I do like the UB. I do like Duo, doing the multi-factor where I've got to push stuff in, and that there's a lot of stuff you could do along those lines too. All right.
Thank you. Who else has a question? We might be out of questions, Jeff. Yeah, we'll be here. So why don't we just any other questions, or any, come up and approach us, and happy to answer anything. So thanks again. Hopefully this was valuable, and we really appreciate the panelists.